Hey everybody, welcome to Close to the Heart here on YouTube.com. I'm Jason Klaus. I certainly appreciate you taking time out of your day to give this episode a watch. I'm very excited about my guest on this episode, one of the independent wrestling's biggest stars on the horizon. And more importantly than that, just an all-around awesome guy. Somebody that I'm very privileged to call my friend, and even more so to have him on this show. Ric Allen joins me on this episode of Close to the Heart. Ric, how are we doing, brother?
Doing okay with all the issues in the world right now, but just getting through and living life.
Yeah, absolutely. As we all are. I mean, this has not been easy by any stretch of the imagination, and you, I would imagine, just as much as anybody is ready for this thing to come to an end so we can start to resume some sort of normality. But we don't want to focus on the world around us right now. We want to focus on more lighthearted things, more fun things. And Ric, you are for the folks watching at home who may not be familiar, Ric is a professional wrestler. He is one of the marquee stars for my Michigan wrestling organization, as well as several other promotions in a variety of states, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, just to name a few. But Ric, before we get into the professional wrestling aspect, let's dive into who Ric Allen is as a person. Give us kind of a walkthrough on what your childhood was, where you grew up, and how you got interested in professional wrestling.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, I was born just a little bit north of Detroit in the city St. Clair Shores, Michigan. I was born in January of 1987, so people can do the math on that one. And growing up, I was always attracted to or into like the comic books and the action shows and superhero related things. Kind of just anything that was kind of fantastical. And eventually, I think I was about the age of 6. That parlayed to wrestling. My dad was already a fan, so WCW Saturday Night at the time was a staple in our house. He had spent some time in Georgia and seen it when it was Georgia Championship Wrestling. So that's kind of how I got in. He was watching it. I started to watch with him, and once I saw Ric Flair, it was on.
So, growing up, were you more of a WCW fan then versus a WWF fan?
Oh, yeah. So that was 93 when I started watching, and I didn't watch the current WWF product until 99.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, very interesting, because a lot of people that I talk to, not just on the show here, but just in general, in this area, we grew up primarily fans of WWF / WWE as it stands now. Some of them watched the WCW show, but primarily because we were in the Northeast and WCW was more of a Southern-based promotion. The primary product here, as far as television exposure for a lot of us, was the WWF show. Now, growing up in the era that I did, and that my brother and I did, it was we had Wrestling Challenge on Saturday morning at 10. At 11, it was the Superstars of Wrestling, and then at noon was the NWA show, World Championship Wrestling. So
okay.
we grew up in a time where we had a lot of exposure to both of the promotions from the mid 80s on. So it's very, very interesting, for you. Your primary focus was WCW. What was it about Ric Flair that attracted you to the show?
I think it just had to be kind of the glitz and glamour to his whole persona. Obviously the way, on the stick as a promo guy, the talker, really brings you in. Also, my dad kind of made a big deal because when I started watching was right when Ric Flair was coming back from his stint in the WWF.
Right.
And so, they were putting the Horsemen back together and making a big hoopla, and my dad was treating it like it was a big deal. So, therefore, it was a big deal to me,
Sure.
and he was presented as the biggest superstar.
So, professional wrestling was something that you and your dad enjoyed. Was that something that was your common bond then?
I mean, among other things like music and stuff, but wrestling definitely. I mean, especially like during the Monday Night War era, every Monday night we were watching Nitro together. Every Saturday night we were watching Saturday Night together. Thunder when it came in there. So, absolutely.
That's pretty cool. Do you have any siblings?
Well, I do have a half brother and two stepsisters.
Okay.
Because my mom had remarried
Right.
after my parents divorced. So,
are you close with them?
Growing up, I was pretty close with the sisters, but since they've kind of moved out of state and married and everything, we're not. I want to say we're not close, but we haven't kept in touch as much. My brother is on the kind of the west side of the state. When we're together, we get along real well. I'd say we're close. I don't know. Probably should be closer than we are, though.
Okay. But I mean, it's not like you guys hate each other or anything like that.
Oh, no. We're just, where we live far apart and we have an 8-year difference between us. So.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I can understand that. So, at what point do you think, as you're growing up, obviously you were exposed to wrestling relatively early, in your life. I would imagine, for the most part, it's something that's been a constant for you, as in terms of as a fan, as tuning in week after week, or was there a time where you kind of shied away from the product because it wasn't blowing wind up your skirt, for the lack of a better term?
No, from 93 on, I've been an avid, fan of wrestling. And, first WCW, then both companies, and then, of course, when WCW was gone, I kind of went full on with WWF. So.
Kind of didn't have a choice there for a little bit, right? Until
No.
TNA became a thing. Well, as a sidebar, when TNA became a nationally known product, was that something that you followed too? Because I surely didn't, because I wasn't going to buy weekly pay-per-views.
When they started with the weekly pay-per-views, like, I kind of followed results online.
Yeah.
I wasn't, like, watching them all the time. But when they got the Impact show on television, I became a big fan and started watching them every week as well. And it's about the same time I also got into Ring of Honor.
Okay. That was going to be my next question: is Ring of Honor on your radar in terms of must-see, pro wrestling product?
Well, see, at the time, Ring of Honor was only really on DVDs. Like, there was no TV show.
Okay.
But they used TNA guys, and that's how I found it. So it was in high school age. Me and a couple of buddies and my girlfriend at the time started going to the Ring of Honor shows when they came to Michigan.
So, at what point do you start thinking, I'm a big fan of the product. I'm a big fan of everything that goes into it. Now, I say your generation because you're you're a little bit behind me in terms of age, right? So I grew up, in the Hulkamania boom of the 1980s, the big first national expansion. And when the Attitude Era happened, I was in my early 20s. So back to back, I am the prime, target as far as that age group.
Mm-hmm.
For you, your exposure to wrestling and the way it's presented overall is certainly night and day difference than what we had when we were kids. At what point did you think, this is something that I really want to do and I want to pursue these dreams of becoming a pro wrestler? Kind of walk me through that whole process.
Well, I think the switch hit for me probably, I'm going to say, sophomore year. And me and a couple of buddies, we had a backyard wrestling group,
Sure.
but we weren't doing it like filmed for anything or crowds. We were just going out there goofing around with each other, playing a couple different characters.
Right.
But then one night, there was a party at my buddy's house, and people knew we did this, so a couple of people at the party wanted to see us do a match. So we, took, I don't know, a few minutes, came up with some ideas, and we went out and performed. And I remember the move, too. I got hit with a big backbreaker from a guy, and I guess the way I sold it, the crowd got really into it and believed everything we were doing. And as soon as I got a touch of, playing people's emotions and selling and doing what pro wrestling is, I knew I wanted to do it.
How old were you back then?
Oh, well, see, I'm trying to think. That was sophomore year. I'm not going to be able to do math, but, yeah.
Okay, so sophomore year in high school.
Yeah.
Okay. So your junior, senior year come now. I would imagine, did you wait till after high school before you started any kind of formal training, or did you continue doing the backyard thing, trying different moves, techniques, that type of thing? What was that part like?
Well, as we got a little older, I moved away there for a little while, so the backyard wrestling stopped. But by the time I got through the rest of high school, by this point, I had fallen. Start over. I had discovered the indies and therefore wrestling schools.
Okay.
And the plan was always to go to wrestling school right out of high school. But hiccup on that was, reach 18 years old, ready to go, and I had no idea what the cost of pro wrestling schools were. So that never really happened at that time. And I just kind of headed off to college instead for, a time there.
Sure.
It would actually be a couple years later before I just chance ran into someone in a bar, by this point I was 24, who had a connection and on my way.
So was that in the Detroit area? Or was that at a time where you had kind of moved away? What part were you in Michigan when all this is going on?
Yeah. By this point, like I said, I had moved up a little bit up north to the New Baltimore area for a few years, but I was back in St. Clair Shores by this time.
Okay.
I had gone to college for art and animation, and then had moved back to the home area. And like I said, I was just in a bar one night down the street from my house, and it was Monday night because Raw was on. The place was kind of empty, so they let me turn on Raw. And one of the cooks in the back came out. We started talking about wrestling. He goes, "Oh, well, by the way, I'm with this kind of half-trained, semi-pro group over in Warren. Would you like to come this weekend and talk to some of the guys and go from there?"
Very cool. So what was the first promotion that you actually performed on a, lack of a better term, a public level?
Well, it was this same promotion at the time. It was XSU, Extreme Slam Unleashed, and that was Owen Travers, who his promotion. But they didn't just let me in. I had to do their training. It wasn't professional training, but their training, and they were pretty close to the real thing. And I had to do camera work and basically, be part of production staff. And then not long after, they made a deal and brought in Briar Wellington, who's a vet in the local scene, been to Japan, done dark matches for WWF, all that, and he started training us. So I basically spent a year training under Briar and running camera for XSU.
That's very, very, that is a crucial part, I feel, in anybody's training and their development to become involved in wrestling. Is not just what happens in the ring, right? You really need to have that experience behind the scenes, running the camera or running the door, running the security, whatever the case may be, announcers in some regards. But would you? I think, and I've always had this mentality, but I think you have a better appreciation for the overall genre, not just one aspect of it. Would you agree with that?
I do, absolutely. Like he wasn't fully trained, but even just doing camera work, you start to appreciate how to present, and you also start to learn just because you start cueing in on like the setups and the positioning, and not only for yourself as a cameraman, but how they're positioning and just certain cues in the ring.
Right, right. So, how long did you stay affiliated with this organization before you started kind of testing the waters or getting that itch to kind of expand your experience by working for other promotions? Because now, I mean, up until everything's been shut down, you have a wide variety of different organizations that you have performed in. So at what point, while you're working behind the camera, and I would imagine you're slowly, starting to make the transition to an in-ring performer, when do you start thinking, I'm interested in seeing what is available at this group or this company, or, how does that process work for you?
It was about a year. It was right after my training was done. I had my debut match in XSU. I got cleared then by Breyer to go elsewhere, and I immediately went other places. He took me to Pro Wrestling All Stars in Detroit and got me booked there first. And then I think within a week or two after that, me and Fat Tony were on a road to our first out-of-state show.
Let's talk about Fat Tony for a minute, because he's been a big part of your story, especially with our promotion. When do you come in contact with him? When do you guys meet? Have you known each other all your lives? What's the dynamic here? Because there is a definite chemistry, a brotherhood between you two.
Well, we met at XSU. He was working security there, wanting to get his foot in the door in wrestling. And he also happened to live at the time 5 minutes from my house, which we didn't know until we met there.
Sure.
I guess we just hit it off talking. We'd ride up to the XSU shows together. And, he was doing the Breyer training for a part of the time. He didn't complete with Breyer. But Tim just had it, Tim, Pat, Tony, whatever people want to say. He just had a knowledge of how to move and how to, especially as a man his size.
Right.
Well, like I said, we kind of hit it off, and as I could tell, he was learning as he went through studying what was going on there, and I may have helped fib a little bit when we went on the road to, help him get booked.
So, I mean, you guys have been tag team partners for the majority of your careers. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, we've a little over 8 years wrestling in the business right now, and we've been tag team partners somewhere at some promotion the entire time.
Have you guys ever really had that big knockdown, drag out feud, between the two of you?
It did happen at MWO. We did the whole breakup there of the Caurdiea brothers, which also included a third, Vinny. And that led to a WrestleRama match, and then a hardcore follow-up with Legos involved. So that was definitely definitely a pretty big feud, I felt, between us.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was, and it's one of those rivalries that you could tell that the fans were invested in, because they were invested in your characters. But let's back up a little bit. When does the MWO become a thing on your radar, and what had you heard? What was good? What was bad? And ultimately, what was the deciding factor for the three of you? There was three of you at that time, to venture over to our organization.
It was pretty early. XSU was still going, and they didn't last much longer after I had completed training. And we had what were their names? We had Hank Mayhem and his partner Mayday at XSU, and they had suggested that me, Vinny, Tony, Owen Travers, and Adrian all come up and check out MWO. And I'm not sure if they'd let you know that we were coming or anything. They were just like, hey, you guys should really come up and check out this place. So we did.
And that's when we were at the bridge, right? Primarily.
Yeah. When it was still like a MMA gym in the back part or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Because I actually wrestled the first match for you guys in NWO, not under the Caurdiea name, but as just Ric Allen.
Oh, fun fact. Fun
Yep.
fact.
Me and Lathan Clemens went out there and crapped the bed with the natural. Was it the Natural Born Villains? Was that the name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael Reaver and Jason Chaos. Yeah.
Yep.
That's fun. How does the Caurdiea thing come up? Well, how did you guys come up with the whole gimmick? Because when you guys came in, you were kind of the greasers. You know, you look like something that came out of the movie Grease. You know what I'm saying? How long had you guys been doing that? Was that a day one thing? How does that character become a thing?
Well, it happened right about that same time as that debut with NWO. And on the side, at another promotion at the same time, they had turned me into a cowboy character. But we were doing a show for, it was like a reunion show for, what are they called? BCWA. It was a reunion show for them, and since some of their guys were working at XSU, they brought some of us in for a battle royal. And at this point, I had no gimmick other than that one place where I was doing the cowboy thing. I was just Ric Allen, black singlet, red boots. That was it. And so I'm not ready to go out for this battle royal, and Vinny Caurdiea, James Sink, he looked at me. He was wearing a leather jacket and had his hair slicked back that day, and at that time, I had a leather jacket for my ring entrance, and he was like, huh, do you have any like hair gel? Put it in your hair, slick it back. I'm like, okay, do it all. He's like, he's looking at the leather jackets, the hair. We both had aviator glasses for some reason. And he goes, we might have something here. So we kind of went out to that battle royal together, not under the Caurdiea name, but doing the whole greaser gimmick and, that we would later do. And then I think it was like the next week after that, we were back at MWO and officially debuted the Caurdiea brothers.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I thought that was something that you guys, because the way you guys played it off, you thought that you had been doing it for 4 or 5 years. It didn't look like something that you were still in its infancy in a lot of cases there. So that's very interesting. That the whole Caurdiea legend kind of became a thing here, and then now look at you. You're all over the place. You're having matches in all kinds of different cities and states, and for different promotions. Do you, at this point in your career, do you use any other name than Ric Caurdiea?
No. Once we hit the greaser thing and became Ric Caurdiea, I stuck with that almost everywhere. There was the 2 places at this point that I was doing the cowboy thing as Richard Allen Price, and there was a tag team. So as soon as my partner from that tag team, he didn't last in the business too long. He skedaddled, and I kind of took the opportunity to wash my hands of that gimmick pretty quickly and
do
the Caurdiea thing everywhere.
So the cowboy thing wasn't something you were really digging? You just did it just for the sake of doing it?
Well, the promoter gave us the gimmick. Literally picked the music, gave me the cowboy hat, everything.
Reached into a box of gimmicks.
Yeah, pretty much. He Bruce Pritchard me right there. But But the thing was about that was like I actually kind of liked doing it with T.J. Richards, who was my partner in that. The Midnight Riders was the tag team.
Okay.
And again, they only lasted at 2 promotions, and one down in Adrian, Michigan, and then downriver. But is that he didn't last very long, and once he was out, I didn't enjoy it by myself. So I, went to the Caurdiea thing. Plus, I think it was right around that time, an issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated in its results page. It had me listed twice, one under each gimmick. I was like, well, that's crap. I want recognition, under one name.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, okay. So we're you guys, you and Tim, Fat Tony, the two of you really skyrocketed. Vinny was here for a brief time, and then for, whatever reason, he was not able to be here on a regular basis. When he departed the company, were you nervous about not having anything happening for your character when you consider that, he was a part of this new thing in the MWO? Because the Caurdiea, the gimmick that you guys had done had never been done here before. So you guys became instantly well known to our fan base. You were the arrogant greaser heels and, blah, blah, blah. When Vinny left the company, did that concern you at all?
I don't think so, because I already had got the feeling that me and Tony were going to have an even better chemistry. Not to say that me and Vinny didn't, but
right.
And he was around. He developed because Vinny is the one who developed the whole gimmick.
Right.
But I felt like we had done it at least even the short time we were together enough for me to get a grasp on it and be able to take it elsewhere.
Okay. Well, you and Fat Tony certainly went on to become one of our best tag teams that we've ever had here. Multiple time, tag champs and high profile angles and feuds. I remember being on the opposite corner from you guys at a Christmas Clash not all that long ago. That was kind of the first time that you and I would actually have any kind of interaction in the ring. And I can tell you wholeheartedly, Rick, that it was on that night. I specifically remember after the show was over and I was on my way home, I was talking to my brother and I said, Ric Allen, Ric Caurdiea is going to be a main event player here. And there's something with Fat Tony too, but if I had to pick one out of that team that was going to be the first to go to main event status, it was Ric Caurdiea. And Jeff could not argue with me. And I specifically remember having that conversation. With that being said, eventually we would kind of split the Caurdieas up. You had expressed some interest in going solo just to kind of see where your footing was. It wasn't like we came up to you and said, Rick, we're going to split the tag team up and we're going to, separate you and Tim and just see what happens here. At what point do you think that you started thinking, maybe I want to kind of try to do something on my own just to see if I can do it on my own?
Well, I mean, I always thought I could go be a singles guy. But I don't think I got the confidence in it until after, we already had done the split, actually. And I first got, my first multi-man, Great Lakes title match with a couple of the other big players. And I think I started to realize I can hang, the confidence comes up. You start to, think about where you can go.
Right. All right. Because, I tell you, when you were in the position to really start becoming a contender for the Great Lakes Championship, that's when we meaning kind of the board of officials, we were really making a concentrated effort to find who our next crop of superstars was going to be, our next big players, main eventers. And I remember having various meetings when we were doing, the booking and the writing and things of this nature as to where the direction was going to go. Ric Caurdiea was at the top of the list for the Great Lakes Championship. We knew we had something with you. We just weren't sure on to what scale. So, there were a couple of them that said, put them straight up into the heavyweight title picture and, throw him in the water and see if he sinks or swims. And having watched you, having worked with you in tag team matches, which is a completely different dynamic than a one-on-one match, and we'll go back to that in just 1 second. But I stood up and I said, we are going to go the Randy Savage route with Ric Caurdiea. We are going to put him in the Great Lakes title, put some damn good talent around him, and see what he does with it. We had matches with you, with Jack Price. Yep. We had matches with you, and I think ex-convict was in there for a match or two. But it was your series of matches that you had with Scotty Freytown that really solidified your status as a main event player. Before we talk about that program, that series of matches that you had with Scott, explain to the people who may not be involved in professional wrestling. They're not wrestlers. They're not involved in the business, but they are hardcore, diehard fans. Explain to them, in your opinion, because you have just about as much experience as anybody, the differences between preparing and working a one-on-one match versus a tag team match.
Well, first and foremost, cardio, because you don't have a partner to rely on. And also in a singles role, the whole structure of a match, you're going to be involved in. I don't know how. We're kind of into the weeds, so I'll just say, from the shine of a match to the heat to a comeback to a finish, that's all you in a singles role. Right. In a tag team match, you're splitting it up. You're kind of think of some psychology of tagging speed to power, all these other little intricate details. And that's not to say one's better than the other, but they do just have a different dynamic. And that's that. But in tag team, it is nice though that you would have a partner to kind of take the load when you need a breather.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially when you get to my point, when you get up there, I'm looking at 26 years, and I much prefer at this point being in tag team matches for that very reason, because I got more matches behind me than I do in front of me at this point. So I guess wanted your opinion on the different dynamics as far as, tag team wrestling versus, being in a one-on-one environment. Do you have a preference one way or the other? I mean, I know you're one of those guys that can do just about anything that you're asked, but if you had the book and you were doing your own booking and that type of thing, would you be a single star, or would you be a tag team specialist?
Singles.
Yeah.
And that's not to say I don't enjoy when I'm doing tag stuff, because I still do quite a bit with Fat Tony and with Adrian Anderson at different places. But I do feel, for the most case, there's always kind of a ceiling on the tag team stuff. And, if you want to reach the top up here, you have to go solo.
Right.
Unless you're the Road Warriors.
I was just going to say that. All right. Let's talk about Scotty Freytown.
Okay.
You guys had.
Actually, can I back you up for just a second, though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because before the great, feud, I feel I had with Scotty over the Great Lakes title, I went through kind of, the character change. And, from the greaser to old school Ric Caurdiea, which is more naturally me being an old school wrestling fan.
Right.
There's actually a good reason for that, why I wanted to make that change. In MWO, I had a series of Great Lakes matches with Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
And coming off of those matches, the kind of the gaga and the goofiness that can go with the greaser gimmick, I started to think wasn't going to cut it. I didn't see the greaser as heavyweight champion. And that's why I decided to change it up to pretty much a more serious version and more natural to me. Just thought I'd put that out there.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the stuff that our fans want to know about, that behind the scenes aspect. And you're right, at this point, you start going through this gimmick change, for the lack of better words. You're no longer the grease. You're no longer Ricky Caurdiea. You're now Ric Caurdiea. More sophistication, sound more professional sounding. You adopt the old school moniker, which, let me tell you, I'm a huge fan of. When you came and said, I'm thinking about changing things up and this is what I'd like to do, I'm pretty sure there was little, if any, resistance from my end to be like, no, I don't think you should do that. In fact, I think I'm like, that is a tremendous idea, and I would like to see how this thing works. Apocalypse. Yes, as you mentioned that, it kind of had, some flashbacks there of moments of your guys' matches, and that was the time that we really started looking at you in a different light. You weren't just an indie tag team guy, you know what I mean? You, for one, you started to really set some roots in the MWO. You and I had a number of conversations about how, you wanted to let me know that you were loyal to the MWO and that I could count on you. Almost a decade later, you are one of my go-to guys. Let me just throw that out there,
I appreciate that.
As a straight up shoot. But as we start going into the business with Scotty Freytown, had you worked with him often in other promotions before we started doing this piece of business in the MWO?
Not a whole lot. We've maybe had one or two tag team matches against each other, and then maybe one kind of short singles match elsewhere, on the indie scene. Mm-hmm. Nothing that was, as in depth and everything that we did in MWO.
Right. Now, it was WrestleRama 2023.
Yes.
Where you guys had a hellacious match for the Great Lakes Championship. WrestleRama that year, 2017, is going to stand out to me for a number of reasons, both personally and professionally. I have always viewed the Great Lakes Championship justifiably as our Intercontinental title, and anybody who knows me knows how much stock I had put into that championship as a WWF fan. So every year when we start booking or start thinking about booking WrestleRama, what's going to be the Great Lakes Championship match has just as much stock as what are we going to do for the main event. Now, you and Freytown elevated your game to the point to where it was inevitable that both of you were going to elevate each other to main event status. And it was on that night, in my opinion, that the entire MWO fan base, at least the ones who were at the venue that night, and those who have watched any of the footage on social media, that's the night that they realized what we knew all along, is that Ric Caurdiea is bound for main event status and could possibly be MWO champion. As for you personally, do you have one specific moment in your career here in the MWO that you think that match or that moment, that night was my launching pad?
Well, it's the one we've been talking about. Me and Scotty at WrestleRama is still, to this day, probably my favorite match of my career. And the backstory on that is, which was great. You guys were looking at us to kind of see what we could do in that position. We kind of came in a little bit with chips on our shoulder, because there was kind of a state of flux in the company at the time. Apocalypse had left. There was a void in the main event scene, and me and Sky both felt, we wanted that level, and we weren't sure if it was going to happen naturally. So we kind of were like, "Damn it, we're going to make it our time. They're going to put us together the Great Lakes title. We're going to do everything we can to steal the damn show and get to that main event level." So we walked in with that thought. Not that it was like an anger or anything towards booking in the company, but just, damn it, we feel like we should be in that spot. We're going to take it.
And I can see that, and I can appreciate that, because there was such, for me, it was turmoil. It was absolute turmoil in a relatively short period of time, trying to get all of our ducks in a row after the whole row had been exploded. It was, based on what we had planned and what was presented, opposite ends of the spectrum, So
well, you found out you lost your main event like 2 weeks before the show, so.
Yeah. And, as well as anybody, this business is nuts. There are so many aspects about it that is bad. But, man, for me, the good outweighs the bad. And if you have the right people in the right places, you can fix just about anything, And that's one aspect of why you and Freytown did essentially steal the show on that night, because you had that drive, you had that chip on your shoulder. And instead of, walking into the venue all boo-boo faced, you guys actually use that as your fuel to what became, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, a classic. I mean, you talk about Great Lakes title matches at our biggest show of the year, Freytown Caurdiea in 2017 is at the top of the list, in my opinion. So once we get past WrestleRama, we get past your business with Scotty, who is a tremendous performer. I mean, let's give him his due too. I had a lot of fun working with him myself. A couple of summers ago, we had an incredible rivalry going on. Much on a different for different reasons, but Scott brought out the best in me when I didn't think I had much left in the tank, and you could tell. And each and every time you guys have worked each other, you could tell that you two brought the best out in one another. That's when, and then unfortunately, Scott would, take a hiatus he would leave the company and things of that nature. We're not going to discuss that here, but, I was at fault. There was fault on the other end of the equation, but that's water under the bridge at this point. Now, for you, once again, you see somebody that you have a lot of chemistry with. You have a lot of momentum going. Now it's inevitable we're going to start pushing you to the main event. As you start becoming a main event star, is when Hoss Fight really starts to become a thing in other promotions, right? We're talking about you, we're talking about Fat Tony, we're talking about Adrian Anderson, and I guess eventually Bam Grizzly. How does Hoss Fight become a thing?
Really, it was just me and Fat Tony had started tagging more frequently again, and because some of the promotions, especially down in Ohio and stuff, started asking us, "Hey, are you guys still gonna tag on a regular basis? We'd love to have you back." And at the same time, Adrian Anderson, he just wanted to get some more bookings and roll with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, if you're in the car, we might as well be, a faction.
Sure.
And so we decided that we'd go that route, and we try and figure out a name. But it was at a show we were supposed to debut as a faction, and it's just before go time, and we were trying to think of a name. So,
right.
But Hoss is usually referred to as bigger guys in pro wrestling, and I don't know. It was just some conversation shooting the ideas around, and I think it was Adrian who blurted out Hoss Fight. So with that, and then Bam got added because he was already would go on the road with us sometimes and learn. Side fun fact: Bam's first professional match was against Adrian in Ohio in a show we took him to. So
that's cool.
So that's where his background to it comes in.
Okay. Because I'll tell you, man, as you start zeroing in on the MWO Championship, Hoss Fight is a thing here, and it is on fire. And our fans, I would imagine a lot of fans in other promotions that have the privilege of seeing Hoss Fight. Man, you guys are on fire. You're so over, especially with our fan base. So now we start going to that day. It was a triple threat match, Summer Smash. For the MWO Championship is on the line. It is you. It is Alex Crow, Jacob Braun. Going into that day, Rick, talk me through your mindset, because you're in the main event of one of our longest running shows, one of our biggest shows of the year. It was a new venue for us. It was outdoors. All the stars are in alignment, and your day is here. Talk me through that day as far as what you can remember.
Well, I knew we probably had something good because, my track record with Crow has been proven. We're always great rivals.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'd say our rivalry is very much more character and dialogue based than as much based on the in-ring action. And then you had Jacob Braun, who is a personal friend, someone I would hang out with. So, I know we have chemistry, and he can go.
Absolutely.
So I knew we were going to have something good. I know there was, up until near that day, there was still up in the air, what direction the company was going to go. So there was, that was obviously on the mind and stuff. But luckily those guys, they trusted me to kind of put together the match. And, my dad was there, and that was the first time he had come to see me wrestle since my debut match back in XSU.
Is that right?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So it was a big day.
It certainly was. I mean, I didn't know that about your dad. So that, man, knowing what he meant to you, to have him there on your day, man, that's something pretty special. I would imagine.
It was.
So, you've had a lot of You've had a lot of marquee matches. You've had multiple title runs. You've had just about every championship in the company. You've done everything, almost everything that there is to do here. Do you have a favorite moment? Do you have a favorite match? I mean, obviously, you said you and Freytown from 2017 that you go to, but aside from that one, is there any other moments that stick out as your personal favorites?
Well, one, I felt very privileged and proud also of my title run as heavyweight champion. I had good matches, I felt, with everyone I got in the ring with. I had very intense feuds that the fans were with, and the fans were really behind me. So I'm just very proud of that whole run. I have to say, out of that run, one of, I don't know, I can't, maybe not my favorite match of the run, but one of my proudest moments. At least I like to think I had a hand in helping elevate. But at the studio, it was the first official opening night of the MWO studio, and on a taping for our YouTube show, Championship Wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
and it was me versus Roberto Cruz.
Yeah.
Been a mid card level guy, and I wanted to elevate him. I knew he could do it, and he didn't let me down. I put together a little match. We used really just the basics of wrestling, the basic formula, and just some good baby face and heel work. And he had his input, but for the most part, he followed kind of what I was asking or putting out there, and I thought we had a hell of a little match there.
You did, and that match was not booked by accident, because it was to start a new era for our organization, and much like you, before you became a main event star, you were on our radar. You were considered. That's where Ray was at that point, and we had actually he and I have been talking a little bit off and on, and I've got there is a specific path for Roberto Cruz, and it's going to be more of a main event level for him, and we can trace that back to that first night at the MWO studio. Because of all the reasons that you said, we knew that if anybody was going to get him to break out of his shell and really embrace who and what he was, personally and on the show, it was going to be you. Because the thing I like about you, Rick, and this is as a promoter, but it is also as a performer, because this series of matches that we had last year were some of my most favorite that I've had in quite some time. And it's because you do not overcomplicate things. You are proof that you don't have to do 1,002 high spots to get fans invested in what you're doing. Because the name of the game, at least in my opinion, is what we do. We are storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
But we instead of reading it out of a book, we are, acting it out very violently, very physically with our bodies. You demonstrate time and time and time again, and I often use you as a benchmark, as you don't have to overcomplicate things in order to tell a good story, and you are so easy to work with. I've never had once I got that first match out, I realized this guy is $1 million. He has the capability to compensate for my shortcomings, and possibly I have the experience to fill in any few lull areas in a match that he may have. So I thought you and I, and the story that we told, it was a simple story, but my God, our fans were invested in that. And by the time we got to Christmas Clash, and we had the cage match, the I Quit cage match, my only regret on that night was that there weren't more people in the building that night, because I thought you and I had at least from my perspective, we had a hell of a match, I thought.
Oh, I think the cage match, the I Quit cage match, was just it was a hell of a fight. It wasn't so much a match; it was a fight. It was a blow off feud, and I'm very proud of that match. And I enjoyed our feud. The Summer Smash match was kind of like a feeling out.
Yeah.
We had a couple hiccups there because we were really feeling each other out there. By the time we did the ladder match and the cage match, we were on fire, I thought.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it rejuvenated my career, because, I mean, I do the CEO role thing now, so now the wrestling is kind of a secondary act for me, because I want to give, let's face it, man. I said it before, I'm not getting any younger, and injuries are starting to last a little bit longer. So I'm not going to be that every week top of the card draw. And, my time has come and gone in that aspect. So, as I'm realizing that, I'm very selective about who I'm going to work with, because I'm only going to work with people, number one, that I trust. Number two, I know I have a good chemistry with. And number three, and more importantly, that we can entertain our fans with. You checked all of those boxes, my friend. And I was very, very happy with the overall feud. I mean, aside from the hiccups at Summer Smash, but we did that was at ONTV. We tried the first ever ladder match in ONTV, which is a confined area. We had another guy in the mix, and Jeremiah J. Hughes. But I thought the three of us, man, I thought we did a very good job when you consider how many aspects were set up for that whole concept to fail, and I don't think it did.
I don't think so. Plus the fact that we basically had to fill an hour of TV time that day.
Yeah.
I think we did about 45 minutes, but things had run short, and you have to remember that we didn't decide on a ladder match until setup time.
Yeah, it was that day we went in and started setting up, and I think you came up to me because I was looking at the ceiling, and I think you had an idea of what I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Could we attach the title to one of these pipes up here? So yeah, it wound up becoming. It became must-see TV that night for our fans, literally, because once we made the announcement, like an hour before we were going to go live on the air, that this is going to be a ladder match or whatever, man, it remains one of the most watched shows on ONTV that live that we've ever done.
Oh yeah,
so I thought
that was great.
That was really cool. Rick, let's talk about your dad a little bit.
Okay.
Man, I can understand wholeheartedly, how sensitive of a subject that this is going to be, but I had the pleasure of meeting him at Summer Smash. I remember that, and I guess I didn't realize on that day that there had been like the second time that he had seen you in a live environment like that. But you lost him not horribly long ago, and has that, because you guys had such a close bond and wrestling was a big part of that, do you find yourself struggling at all was there ever a question of you needed to take time off for the mourning process? Because when people lose loved ones, they deal with it in different ways, especially those that you're really close to. And from what I can understand, you and your dad were pretty close, right?
We were, I guess the only advantage I had in processing the situation is it was like we knew it was coming. He'd had some health issues for over a year at that point, in and out of the hospital. So, and the conditions he had, there was organ failure and stuff involved, and a blood disease. The end result was kind of known.
Right.
Not to say that means it hurt any less, but I don't know. I guess I was just somewhat more mentally prepared. So no, I really didn't take any time off from really anything. I think I took a couple days off of my regular weekday job.
Yeah.
And that was more or less to take care of things at the hospital, cremation, because that's what he wanted, and all that kind of stuff. But it just feels still, that was just before Thanksgiving, and there still feels like an absence. I don't have my dad and my family over in St. Clair Shores anymore, and it's just a weird feeling. When I have a great match, I want to show video, and it's like he's not there to show it to.
Right.
But
yeah, we were.
Sorry, I just want to say I had a great support though with Angie and the kids.
Let's talk about Angie for a minute.
Okay.
Worth $1 million, right?
She is.
I mean, she is a fantastic person, and I was kind of the outsider looking in, kind of observing your guys' relationship, kind of materialize to what it is now, and she's got 2 great kids. You certainly have fit into that family man role. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. She kind of keeps me on the straight and narrow, which is good.
Yeah.
Not that I was ever like a troublemaker or anything, but I could be, I could probably spend a little too much time having beers or whatever. Need to be, reeled in a little bit.
Sure.
So, it's been good, and I can't complain. Got a great life now with her and the kids, and a house, and it was time.
Sure. Yeah, she's I could really tell. You and I, but up until last a year and a half or whatever, you and I didn't spend a whole lot of time on personal time. Getting to know one another or what have you. So, I kind of had a unique perspective, and you can tell, man, just the positive changes that she has made on your life. And I mean, when I see you two together, I mean, pictures is one thing, and I mean, you can tell that there is a lot of love between you two in pictures. But when you're fortunate enough to see it in person, you don't just see it, man. You guys have an aura, when you're together, and it's really quite remarkable. And I'm so happy for you both, because you can tell you complement each other just about perfectly. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I think you guys are fantastic.
Thank you. And technically, I owe that one to wrestling too, because we were introduced through Jesse Christian, the commentator.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's cool. Funny how it all comes back around, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Rick, as we wrap up this episode, are there any websites, anything you want to plug, anything you want to say before we put a bow on this?
Well, first of all, of course, if anyone wants to follow, my wrestling career, of course, mostly best place is Facebook. Old School Ric Caurdiea - Pro Wrestler. That's the account. Plus, there's also the Hoss Fight page. And because most of the time, matches, everything I post up on there, and you can find up flyers and everything of upcoming events. And other than that, I just want to say to MWO fans and fans, just anywhere I've been, just a big thank you, because I don't. Not a lot of people probably would have thought I would have made it in a athletic endeavor, and the fans have really supported me, and I appreciate that, and I hope they continue to, and as well as everyone else in indie wrestling as a whole.
Very well said, my friend, and you're absolutely right, because listen, on your worst day, just remember, you have made a significant impact to a lot of people, personally, professionally. Quick personal story, and when I think of Ric Allen, this is the first memory that comes to my mind is my wife and a friend of mine had set up a surprise birthday party for me to celebrate my 40th. And when I walked into the establishment that they had this thing set up at, one of the first people I locked eyes on, and I couldn't believe was there once everything kind of clicked as to what was happening, was you. And I couldn't believe that you had made that trip to Flint from the Detroit area for my birthday party. And dude, you'll never know how much that meant on a personal level. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Ric Allen. So that just goes to show what a class class act you are. Just an all around awesome person, and I am so thankful that you and our paths crossed in life, personally and professionally. Your best days are still yet to come, my friend, and I'm going to be very excited to see them from the outside looking in.
Well, thank you. And I just, on a side note, I want to go back and just say, you know, shouldn't have been so surprised we are there, because I look at you and everyone in the NWO all as family. And I mean, maybe we're not talking every day or hanging out at someone's house together every day, but family nonetheless.
Couldn't said it better. Ric, thank you so much, brother, for taking time out of your day to to sit down with me. This was a fun conversation.
Good.
You know, kind of cool to get to know the backstory of you, not just necessarily the wrestler. So thank you so much. For the rest of you watching at home, thank you for taking time out of your day to watch the episode. Follow us on Facebook, and it has all of updated information for all of the shows across the Close to the Heart platform. For my friend Ric Allen, and for all of us who put this show on, thank you so much. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you next time right here on Close to the Heart.